Under the burning jungles of Southeast Asia, a superpower believed it could not lose. The United States, armed with the most advanced technology, vast resources, and immense confidence, entered a small country called Vietnam, convinced it would be another quick victory for democracy. But what unfolded was something far different. A brutal, drawn-out conflict that shattered American confidence, divided a nation, and reshaped global politics. The Vietnam War became not just a battle for territory, but a test of ideology, endurance, and the limits of modern warfare. And in the end, it wasn't tanks or planes that decided the outcome. It was determination, strategy, and a people who refused to surrender. To understand how America's strategy failed and how the North Vietnamese won, we must start long before the first U.S. troops landed. Vietnam had spent centuries fighting off foreign powers, from Chinese dynasties to French colonizers. In the 19th century, France turned Vietnam into part of its Indochinese colony, ruling it for nearly 100 years. But beneath the surface, resentment brewed. Vietnamese nationalists dreamed of independence, and after World War II, one man emerged as their leader, Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh was a revolutionary who had traveled the world, studied Marxism, and envisioned a Vietnam free from colonial control. When Japan's occupation ended in 1945, he seized the moment. Standing before a crowd in Hanoi, he declared Vietnam's independence, quoting directly from the American Declaration of Independence. "All men are created equal," he proclaimed. But the world wasn't ready to recognize his new government. The French returned, determined to reclaim their colony, and the First Indochina War began. For 8 bloody years, Vietnamese guerrillas, the Viet Minh, battled French forces in jungles, rice paddies, and mountain valleys. The war culminated in 1954 at Dien Bien Phu, where the Viet Minh surrounded and defeated a major French stronghold. The French, humiliated, withdrew. The Geneva Accord soon followed, dividing Vietnam into 2 zones: Communist North Vietnam under Ho Chi Minh and anti-communist South Vietnam under Ngo Dinh Diem. It was meant to be temporary. An election was planned to reunify the country. But those elections never happened. The United States, fearing the spread of communism under the Cold War's domino theory, threw its support behind South Vietnam. The theory claimed that if one nation in Asia fell to communism, others would follow: Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, even Indonesia. America's goal was simple: stop communism at any cost. But this decision would pull the U.S. deeper into a war it couldn't win. At first, America's involvement was limited: financial aid, advisors, and weapons. But the situation in South Vietnam began to crumble. Diem's government was corrupt, unpopular, and repressive. His harsh policies alienated Buddhists, peasants, and even his own military. By 1963, Diem was overthrown and assassinated in a coup. The South descended into political chaos, while the North, backed by the Soviet Union and China, saw an opportunity. Under Ho Chi Minh's leadership, North Vietnam supported a growing insurgency in the South known as the Viet Cong. These guerrilla fighters used hit-and-run tactics, blending in with civilians, vanishing into jungles and striking suddenly. The Americans called them elusive, invisible, impossible to fight. But the Viet Cong had something far more powerful than modern weapons, a cause they believed in. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident changed everything. After reports that North Vietnamese boats had attacked U.S. destroyers, President Lyndon B. Johnson gained approval from Congress to take all necessary measures in Vietnam. Whether the attack truly happened as reported remains debated to this day, but it opened the floodgates. America was now officially at war. By 1965, U.S. combat troops landed in Vietnam. They came by the tens of thousands. Young men, many barely out of high school, sent halfway around the world to fight in a country most couldn't even locate on a map. Their mission was to defend South Vietnam and crush the Viet Cong. The strategy? Search and destroy. Helicopters would drop American troops into the jungle. They'd sweep through villages, locate enemy positions, and call in airstrikes or artillery. Each mission was measured not by territory gained, but by body count, the number of enemy killed. The higher the number, the closer the victory. But this system was deeply flawed. The Viet Cong rarely fought in open battles. They set traps, ambushed patrols, and disappeared. And when civilians were caught in the crossfire, American credibility suffered. Meanwhile, in the dense jungles and underground tunnel networks, the Viet Cong used an entirely different playbook. They were patient, resilient, and resourceful. Their tunnels stretched for miles, entire underground cities where they slept, ate, planned, and waited. Every tree, every rice paddy, every farmer could be a potential ally or a potential ambush. The Americans had firepower, but the Vietnamese had time and terrain. The US unleashed its full military might. Napalm, cluster bombs, and chemical defoliants like Agent Orange, designed to strip away the jungle cover. Cities were bombed, rivers turned orange, and villages burned. But each strike only hardened the local resistance. For every village destroyed, more Vietnamese joined the fight. Then came the Tet Offensive in 1968, a turning point that shocked the world. During the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, when both sides had agreed to a temporary ceasefire, the North launched a massive surprise attack across South Vietnam. Over 100 cities and military bases were hit, including the US Embassy in Saigon. Though the Viet Cong suffered devastating losses, the psychological blow was immense. Americans had been told the war was being won, yet the enemy had just struck at the heart of US defenses. Television brought the war into American living rooms. Night after night, citizens watched footage of burning villages, flag-draped coffins, and soldiers questioning why they were there. Public support collapsed. Protests erupted across the United States. Young people burned draft cards, chanted against the war, and demanded answers. For the first time in US history, it wasn't just a war fought overseas. It was a war fought at home. The US military continued to escalate. Over 500,000 troops were deployed. Massive bombing campaigns like Operation Rolling Thunder aimed to crush North Vietnam's will to fight. But the opposite happened. The more America bombed, the more determined the North became. In the jungles, guerrilla warfare continued to bleed American forces. No matter how many battles they won on paper, the war seemed endless. Soldiers returned home disillusioned, scarred, and often broken. Many couldn't explain why they were fighting, or for whom. By the early 1970s, the war's cost, both human and political, had become unbearable. Over 58,000 Americans were dead. Millions of Vietnamese, both North and South, had perished. The US economy strained, its global reputation damaged. President Richard Nixon promised to bring peace with honor through a strategy called Vietnamization, training South Vietnamese forces to take over the fight as American troops withdrew. In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. The last US troops left Vietnam. But the peace was fragile, and the South couldn't stand alone. Without American support, its government began to collapse. 2 years later, in April 1975, tanks of the North Vietnamese Army rolled into Saigon. Helicopters evacuated the last Americans from the US Embassy rooftop as desperate South Vietnamese tried to escape. The war was over. North Vietnam had won. The country was unified, but at an unimaginable cost. So how did the United States, the most powerful military on Earth, lose to a smaller, poorer nation? The answer lies in strategy, misunderstanding, and willpower. America fought a conventional war against an unconventional enemy. It relied on technology and numbers, while the North relied on endurance and conviction. The Americans sought to win hearts and minds, but often alienated the very people they wanted to protect. And while US generals measured progress in battles won, the North measured success in survival itself. The Vietnamese fought for independence, unity, and a cause they viewed as just. The Americans fought for a policy, one rooted in Cold War fears, not in the realities on the ground. The longer the war dragged on, the more it became clear that one side could afford to lose thousands. The other could not afford to lose at all. When the final helicopter lifted off from Saigon, it wasn't just the end of a war. It was the end of an era, the moment America's image of invincibility was shattered. The Vietnam War changed everything. It altered US foreign policy, sparked decades of debate, and redefined what it meant to be a superpower. In the years that followed, Vietnam rebuilt from ashes. It became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that determination can overcome even the greatest odds. For America, the lessons were painful but lasting. Power alone cannot guarantee victory, and technology cannot replace understanding. Today, the Vietnam War stands as one of history's most complex and haunting conflicts. A war not just of bullets and bombs, but of ideology, strategy, and human endurance. It was a war that taught both sides a truth often forgotten. Sometimes, the strongest army is not the one with the biggest guns, but the one with the deepest resolve. And as the jungles of Vietnam grew back over old battlefields, they concealed not just the scars of war, but the story of how a nation, against all odds, defied the mightiest power on earth and won.